Hey, 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 everybody, are you ready? I don't even know why I did that, but you know what? Let's get into it. So, for this synth assignment, I technically used three synths, but two of them are the same type of synth, if that makes sense. So, the first one that I needed was for my bass line for this short little snippet. So, for the bass line, this is the synth I used. It's pretty basic. Now, one thing to note is FL Studio does have a broad arrangement of synths. Some of them you do have to pay for, but they do look more like a traditional synth, if that makes sense. So, I first started with the oscillator, and I chose a square waveform. Now, I'm not gonna lie, I would have preferred to have a sine waveform because it's just softer, but I did like the robustness of the square, and this synthesizer in particular doesn't have that option. But I didn't do a lot of effects in terms of oscillation. Everything really happened in the oscillation envelope. So for the bass line, I wanted it to be very punchy and have a great attack, a good decay, sustain, but the release I had to be very careful on, so that way the notes didn't bleed upon each other. So with the filter, as I said before, I did prefer a sine wave, but I did know that you can kind of filter different frequencies out, or just filter the whole entire synthesizer, so that way it will sound softer. So I did do that. And this filter envelope is pretty basic. I didn't use any oscillators on this because I wanted the bass line to be very straightforward. So the second synthesizer that I used, and this one is different, is called a plucked synthesizer. So I wanted it to be very harpy, and not necessarily like a guitar, but I knew I actually have used this synthesizer in previous song projects before. But this is what it looks like. So it's very, 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 very basic. It only has two knobs. It has a decay knob and a color knob. And the color really affects the timbre, and the decay affects the decay. So the decay, you do have to be careful that the notes also don't bleed. And the color, you can really just change the timbre to what you want it to be. And of course, you could EQ and do all types of signal processing later, but it's great to have a good sound source to begin. So I have that in the song as well, as you can see. And then the last synthesizer I used is I called it the second synth. It's not necessarily like a melody line, but it's the same type of synthesizer that I used for the bass. So for here, the oscillator, I used a saw waveform. I wanted it to be very clear and not necessarily as robust in terms of bassiness and presence, but just clear. So I have a saw waveform. I didn't really change anything, but I did have the notes slide, and I had that in mono. So that way the notes will come together and be cohesive. So for the envelope of this, again, I wanted the attack to be very abrupt. The decay, I didn't want a ton of decay, nor a ton of sustain, but I did want a good release. And the filter of it, I wanted to be very soft and not the clearest, if that makes sense, but decisive, I guess, if that's even the right word for this. You'll hear it in the video or in my audio as well. And the filter envelope is the same as the one before. I didn't really change anything. I didn't use any oscillators because I didn't feel that the song needed it, but I mean, maybe in the future, maybe I will. I didn't use any effects at all. Although I was debating on doing a chorus effect or maybe a phaser effect. I didn't really think about delay much, but I mean, for this short little song snippet, I was too, what is the word? I'll say I wasn't trying to get too tied up in just different decisions and just trying to make something and try something new. So overall, I hope you all enjoy this short little song. This isn't my first time working with synthesizers, but it is my first time intentionally building synthesizers, like from the bottom up, if that makes sense, because other ones are just like string presets or string samples that ended up being synthesizers. So there's that. All right, I will see you all later. Please enjoy this short song snippet. All right, bye.